Okay, so any questions on that 50 marker, let me know. Otherwise, we're going to move on to the 25 marker. I'm probably going to have to overrun for 5 minutes. So I've taken this question on economic growth in India because, again, I feel like it it should be just about doable with what you guys have done so far. You don't need a lot of the advanced macro specification to develop and answer this question. That said, I would be suggesting a couple of different points as to the ones I'll probably suggest if we were a little further in the syllabus. But okay, so we've got assess the importance to the UK economy of continued economic growth in India. Very interesting question. Not necessarily super hard, but maybe not easy. And the reason for that is just about the interrelationship of national economies, right? We're not being asked about something only in the UK, like how does an event in the UK affect the UK economy? We're getting asked about how something in another country affects the UK economy. And that does make it a little less straightforward than just if I got rid of in India here, that would be a really easy question. Assess the importance to the UK economy of continued economic growth. That is the dream. So it does make it a bit more complicated to be thinking, okay, it's not economic growth in the UK. It's how does economic growth in India affect the UK? Is that important to the UK? And we've got a lot of flexibility in this word importance as well. How I define that is kind of up to me to a degree, as long as it's sensible, as long as it makes sense. So I'm going to think about the UK objectives really. Is economic growth in India important to the UK in terms of meeting its economic objectives? That's probably how I'm going to interpret this. Which again is very nice amount of flexibility. They haven't said assess the importance to UK growth or assess the importance to UK employment or assess the importance to the UK finances. They haven't been too specific, which is nice. We've got a nice range. What we then want to do, and again, I'm going to have to keep this very speedy, is have a look at the extract, see if there are any clues. Whilst this was in, again, 2000, I think this paper is Jan 2012, if anyone wants to have a look. And the maths question is a really good one to practice what we did last week, by the way. It's Jan 2012, Unit 4 paper. So I think, what was I saying? I think if we go through the extract and try and grab some stuff for this question, then we can kind of get to writing it. So we are looking for any clues about how the UK might benefit from Indian growth or might lose out from Indian growth. That's never mind. Later. I'm getting ahead of myself. So okay. So we see in July 2010, UK Prime Minister led a government delegation to India. The hope was that India's economic success could help bring some relief to the UK economy, speed the recovery process through increased exports. Immediately taking that. So if India grows, India's economic success could mean we increase exports. That's of course because if India grows, that literally means they've got more income. If they've got more income, they can buy more UK goods, more exports for us, more aggregate demand. That's our point one. That's immediately, very easy. Point one, increased AD for UK. And so the point I was going to make earlier, which I kind of got distracted, and okay, is I might do this like speaking from, how do I put this, but as if I'm answering today, not in 2012, not when the paper's from. So I might include more recent events in this essay than I did in the last answer. So increased AD for UK, that's our first point for sure. Let's see what else we've got. Growth rate quotation, we could use that. It doesn't really give us a point like the increased exports quote did, but we could use just this growth figure. GDP per capita is 3,100. That's quite low. That could potentially be evaluation. 400 million Indians live below the international poverty line. Again, could be evaluation in the sense that who exactly is going to be buying the UK exports UK exports quite expensive services a lot of the time. So we've got a question: is the Indian consumer market really going to be that important for the UK? Do we sell the kind of things that people going from $3,000 to $5,000 say are going to be buying? So that could be interesting evaluation. Hold the size of the labor force and the unemployment rate. Those aren't easy to use for me, so I'm going to move on. For the Indian government, inflation and economic growth at the top of the agenda. Unfortunately, there's a trade-off between these two indicators. Inflation jumped from 1 to 3% in October 2009 to almost 5% in November 2009. Okay, I think this could be quite useful. Now, this is a bit more involved, what I'm going to do, but inflation November 2009, let's highlight that, is 5%. Growth in 2010 is expected to be 9%. So I remembered that from earlier. And that together means real incomes in India are rising, which is potentially good for the UK in terms of selling things to India. So I can use a combination of these two to say that in real terms, Indian consumers should be getting richer. Despite the 5% inflation, their economy is growing by 9% a year. So they should be getting richer and therefore more able to buy UK products. So we've also got the UK government still hopes to promote increased UK involvement in India. Certainly, Indian business has become more involved in the UK. Tata, one of India's oldest companies, is now the UK's leading manufacturer. So this definitely gives us some points. So we've got the idea of Indian businesses investing in the UK, and I think that could be a very simple point. Point two, increased inward investment, or just increased investment. Let's keep that simple, actually. Increased investment in the UK, and maybe I could talk about increased LRS, because if you have more capital, you have more production potential, which is basically what long and aggregate supply indicates. And I've also got that, as well as India being able to invest in the UK, we could talk about the UK investing in India. So we could talk about kind of both sides of that coin as a potential point. And I don't think I'm going to have time to really do all three of these, which would be my preference if I was writing this IRL. So increased investment into India, and we could link that to the current account because outward FDI will generate primary income inflows, as I discussed last week. This will help the current account. I think I'm definitely going to do this point. I like this one. Okay, and I think that should be it for points. It looks like the rest of this paragraph is giving us some examples of companies that have done this. So we can definitely use that for easy AO2. Infrastructure investment is urgent. Maybe that could be used as a valuation. Get told there's inadequate storage facilities, poor road and rail links in India. So maybe British companies won't want to invest as much as we think, or they won't want to invest until these problems are sorted, which kind of dilutes the strength of the investment point, which is good because that's what an evaluation can do, discuss a weakness in the previous point. The Indian government plans to spend 500 billion to help improve this. So again, we could maybe talk about how successful these new infrastructure projects are. Although it does say here, so maybe I'm overcomplicating it, the growth of the Indian economy will help UK service exporters such as banking, education, healthcare business. And that could be related to this kind of improvement in infrastructure. So maybe a lot of the Indian firms building infrastructure in India might need banking services that UK firms can provide, or accounting services. that UK firms can provide. So we could use this as AO2 as well to support our previous point. Looks like this paragraph could give us some evaluation. India remains fiercely protective. Investment and trade flows from the UK could remain limited. Okay, that's definitely a big clue on evaluation. It's definitely going to be one of my points. This again gives a lot of strength to an evaluation, saying it depends on the trade relationship between the UK and India. If India is fiercely protective, that typically means they don't encourage free trade as much as other countries. So they might not want to trade with us, simply put. Okay, at the same time, the view was also expressed this interesting. The UK needs India much more than India needs the UK. So I like that as potential evaluation. Especially if you just think about the size, the sheer size or the future size of the Indian economy compared to the UK, we are possibly much more reliant on making India a market than India is on getting things from the UK or making the UK a market. Because it's a much bigger country, it counts for a much bigger percent of possible markets. So that could be an interesting evaluative point. But okay, let's crack into this and see where we end up. So I'm going to have to be really quick because I've only left myself like 25 minutes. This might have to be the other way around, that the 50 markers more like full marks and the A-level essay is more like trying to get an A. But we'll see. Okay, let's define economic growth and assess the importance. I wanna tell the examiner how I'm interpreting that phrase. They've given me this phrase importance, which isn't really clear. So I'm gonna try and make it clear. As long as I'm logical in what I do, it should be accepted by the examiner. Okay, so economic growth can be defined as an increase in the value of output goods and services in an economy over a given period. Okay, this is usually measured through increases in nominal or real GDP, although and be alternatively measured through GNP or GNI. If you don't know that, that's fine. That's extension. It's extension material. So there's the kind of thing like, again, if you're a star student, hopefully you'd be able to sprinkle in some things that aren't necessarily on the specification every now and then. Okay. When we discuss the importance of economic growth in India for the economy, it is essential to think about the UK economy's objectives. If the growth of India will have significant impact on the UK's objectives, we may declare that the growth of India is indeed important. Main macroeconomic objectives of the UK include economic growth, employment, controlling inflation, and stable/equilibrium trade, say bounce payments. They may also concern themselves with the state of government finances, inequality, and the environment, and environmental sustainability. That sounds a bit more fancy, doesn't it? environmental sustainability. Okay, quite a chunky introduction, not going to lie, but what I've really tried to do there is, and I think this is something that A-level students often is a skill worth trying to develop, because it's often a skill you don't necessarily have going into A-levels. But I'm trying to really specify how I'm going to approach the question. This isn't just pure knowledge, right? This introduction isn't just regurgitating knowledge definitions or even AO2. It's literally spelling out, especially here, how am I going to approach this question? How am I interpreting the question that's been given to me, especially in this case, as they've deliberately given me this word importance, right? There isn't like, there's no economics class where they're going to say, here is the definition of importance. What does the word importance mean, in case they ask you about it in essays. So they can do this kind of thing, and obviously I have kind of just told you how to interpret importance, but then it might not be importance next time, right? You know, it might be a synonym for importance next time, and again, you've got to kind of think about how you're going to relate that to the course. How are you going to break that down and answer the question while sticking to the question? So as long as I stick to the objectives here, I am sticking to the question, because I have said we can think about importance to the UK economy in terms of the objective. So, okay, let's get this show properly on the road. So, one reason the growth of India may be very important to the UK economy is because of the potential to increase economic growth in the UK. So hopefully that sentence makes sense, but basically if India grows, this may encourage UK economic growth. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make some quotes. I'm going to kind of rush this rather than take my usual care and attention, but this can be seen in extract B, I think it was, extract B, where quotes, where it is said India's growth may bring some relief to the economy and speed the recovery process through exports. I'm going to try and get another quote in, bulk up that AO2, and we had something about here we go. There's an investment. India's government's investment is a opportunity for UK businesses, basically, and the Indian government's infrastructure investment is an export opportunity for UK firms specializing in infrastructure projects. And maybe I will be able to do this on time, because one of the nice things about macro is once you learn certain strategies for explaining things, you can just regurgitate a certain method, a certain path to explaining something. So if I go up to my previous answer where I explained how AD will fall and this will increase growth, I can basically just reverse. I'm not going to, but I'm basically just going to be cutting and pasting this explanation, switching it around so that it's AD rising instead of AD falling, and that's going to be my paragraph here. Basically, I've got my AO2 in, so I'm good to go. So again, to try and save time, because I have not managed my time effectively here, I'm just going to say exports up. That's obviously going to be AD up, then GDP up. And you could even do the whole living standards, non-material living standards here. If you're the kind of person who can really just keep writing, many pages for your essays, then you could even go further into living standards. But I think I'm going to leave it there as a point one. Oh, sounds like someone's joined in. Oh dear. It's nice first reaction in the class. Oh no, what has happened, guys? So, okay, for evaluation, evaluatively, This very much depends on the trade relationship between the UK and India, which is by no means guaranteed. Guaranteed to be free and welcoming, as describes. And again, I think we had some pretty easy quotes here. We've got India remains fiercely protective and trade flows could be limited, so I'm going to use that. India remains fiercely protective and just going to kind of cut that out. Trade flows from the UK could remain limited. This means basically that even if India has the money to trade with the UK, it may not want to and may focus instead on promoting domestic consumption, production, and investment. So I'm probably going to leave it there. This AQA, it seems to me, looking at the examiner reports, they prefer quite brief evaluation and then a really chunky conclusion. I kind of want to add more. There's more to explain here. There's more to say. We could talk about tariffs, about how tariffs come into this. So India might be setting tariffs on UK products, which might mean the UK retaliating with tariffs of its own, which means India might not be buying from the UK. We could talk about geopolitics at the moment with India not condemning Russia as openly as others and being prepared to buy oil from Russia when a lot of other countries are trying to sanction purchases of Russian oil. So there's this potential political tension between the UK and the West and India, which might mean a free trade agreement isn't guaranteed. So there is a lot more we could do with this. And again, if I had the time and I was sort of committed to making this an absolutely full marked A star, I would probably get into that, especially the latter point on current affairs. So I think instead of the increased investment point, I'm going to leave that one and I'm going to take this one because it's a little more complex. So let's do this second point, then evaluate, and then if we have time, we'll conclude. So a second reason, bold, a second reason the UK, or let's be really like always use the question as directly as possible. Quote the question basically in your first point. A second reason India's growth may be important to the UK. So I almost said beneficial there, and it's not like a million miles away. But again, the question doesn't say is it beneficial. It says is it important to the UK. So I want to use the exact same terminology when I introduce my point. So a second reason India's growth may be important to the UK is because it may help the UK deal with its current account deficit. Latest figures for which are minus 28.5 million, which is 4.2% of the UK's GDP. So I happened to be reading about this the other day. It's very easy to go online to the ONS website and see basically what I showed you guys last week, just the current account figures for the UK. Very easy, very straightforward, easy to read. You before your exam, you should do this for all your main objectives, right? Find the inflation rate. I can't tell you the exact inflation rate off the top of my head right now. I know it roughly, but if I was sitting the exam tomorrow, I would know the inflation rate of the UK right now. I would know the unemployment rate. I would know what the current account deficit is as a size of GDP, blah, blah, blah. So no pressure now, but make sure at some point, in the months before your exam, you get all the UK's current data. So this is literally the latest figures, which is April to June 2023. So yeah, I have to keep on top of it all the year, but again, just towards exams, get on that for easy AOT. So one of the issues for the UK economy in terms of its current account balance is that it has too many inward investment inflows relative to outward investment in outward investment flows. Wait, inward investment inflows, that doesn't make sense. Inward investment flows relative to outward investment flows. There we go, got there eventually. So I'm going to say what this means, like in simple terms, and I'm going to put that in my answer as well. What this means is that there is a greater value of foreign investment into the UK, e.g., the Saudi, what's it called? Sovereign wealth fund that purchased Newcastle United. Then there is value of UK investment into other countries. So basically, we let other countries invest in our businesses more than we're investing in businesses in other countries. And what this means is, as I will now explain, as a result, the UK sends a larger value of income, e.g. dividends, to foreign shareholders, let's say asset holders, than the income we receive from our foreign assets. So basically, like if you imagine all these foreign investors have invested in UK companies, we have to pay them dividends, of course. So those dividends are going to be going out the UK. And then if we've invested in foreign companies, then we're going to get dividends from that income coming into the UK. At the moment, we've got more income going out the UK for this than we have going in. So we're losing more income to people who own UK assets than we are gaining income from our own asset purchases. So as India grows, it can provide an attractive location for outward investment. Extract quote, blah, blah, blah. Jaguar and Land Rover, was that? No. That was inward investment. Companies such as Vodafone and BAE have relocated in India. Okay. I'm not sure if that is the case there, so I'm actually just going to take this because that's a direct reference. Call center activity relocated from the UK. So that's an example. As India grows, it can provide an attractive location for outward investment, e.g. for, let's cut out the 3 in that quote, so that makes sense, for call center activity relocated from the UK. This outward investment can generate long-term primary income flows that will help reduce the UK's current account deficit, where, or is it 10.3? It might be 10.3 or 10.8, I think, where the primary income balance is currently 10.3 million in deficit. Okay, so I like this again. I possibly would have done the other point if I'd been doing this exam conditions. I've done this again, because I think it's a good way to demonstrate a more difficult topic to use. So this really, really builds from what we did last week, right? This discussion of the relationship between investment flows, income flows, how that fits into the current account, capital account. And yeah, we're just saying here, basically, if the UK can invest more in India as it grows, that's going to generate more income for the UK, and that's going to go on the current account, which is currently a deficit. And so if we've got more inflows on our current account, which is currently a deficit, we're going to move away from deficit, right? Because the inflows are basically a positive that moves you towards a surplus. So, okay, I think on balance, I might have gone a bit too much into how the current account structure works here and less into how Indian growth is relevant. So I've said as India grows, it can provide an attractive location for outward investment. I might change that. It can provide a more profitable, that's a bit more specific, right? Attractive is a bit like, it's not quite specific. Whereas really, it's important that it's more profitable, because if it's more profitable, then the dividends received from the investments will be larger. So this then helps this idea of primary income flows coming in make sense. If India is growing more, we can get more profits from investing in India, and then that's going to generate a larger income for the UK economy. So, okay, for evaluation, there's quite a few ideas here. I think we could potentially use the extract and talk about the lack of infrastructure in India and how it might not be an attractive place for investment, even if it's growing, because of the lack of rail and transport. And then that could work quite well with a conclusion, which I don't think I'm going to have time for, sadly, but that could work quite well with a conclusion, because we can then say, well, UK firms might be providing a lot of services which don't really need pre-existing physical infrastructure. They won't be doing manufacturing, which is more what needs like a rail and road links. But I think what I'm going to do, again, not because it's necessarily the best choice, and I would often say the best choice in the exam is whatever gets you the marks most easily, most quickly, you know. But this time I am gonna, well, not this time, I've done this quite a few times. Again, I'm gonna do something more to show you how you might use something a bit more difficult rather than take the easy option. So I'm going to try and use some of the evaluations we had for talking about the importance of the current account deficit from last lesson. And so here's the logic there. I have argued just here that the growth of the growth of India is important to the UK because it will help us fix our current account deficit. So doesn't it make sense that if I can argue the current account deficit isn't actually a problem for the UK, or itself the current account deficit itself is not that important for the UK economy, then that diffuses the previous argument, right? If the current account deficit isn't that important, it doesn't matter that India growing will help the current account deficit. India growing is important to help the current account deficit if helping the current account deficit itself isn't important. So it's a slightly more complex kind of logical argument than the easy option of just saying like depends on how good the infrastructure is in India, but that's what I'm going to go with here. So evaluatively, the extent to which the UK's current account deficit is a problem is arguable, meaning the importance of India's growth in ameliorating. How is it I can spell ameliorating but not relieving? Ameliorating this problem. The importance for India's growth in ameliorating this problem is also debatable. So do I need to explain that a little more? Sure. If the current account deficit itself is unimportant, it cannot be argued that the growth that fixing this through growth in India suggests growth in India is important. Firstly, the UK current account deficit could be taken as a sign of economic success rather than failure. I love this point, gonna be honest. As it shows the UK's power as an international consumer with higher living standards than producer countries like India or China. Secondly, the UK may be able to cover the current account deficit with a financial account surplus, and it has a floating exchange rate that, in theory, will correct the current account deficit over time without the need for greater investment abroad. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Again, I'll leave it there because, well, firstly, we're out of time. Secondly, it's already really chunky for AQA. And again, I'm stressed like in ideal exam conditions where I'm not sort of trying to explain it as I go, I would have probably done 3 points. Managed the time a bit better for this than the 50 marker. The 50 marker, I just did way too much for what I was trying to achieve. But I'd probably want to do a 3rd point and trim down the eval a little under realistic conditions because they seem to like 3 or 4 points. You can get away with 2, but the like 25s out of 25s I've seen all have 3 or 4 points and quite brief evals and then a really chunky conclusion. So I'm not going to have time for the conclusion, but I will say try and give an overall summary, maybe give you guys an idea of where I would go with the conclusion. I think, okay, here's what I'm thinking for the conclusion. I'm probably going to make use of that quote about the UK needs India much more than India needs the UK. I think I'm going to say that overall India is very, very important to the UK economy. And this is broader than just economic growth or the current account deficit. It's because any country, like if France grows, that can improve our current account deficit and increase our growth. That those arguments that we've made in the essay could apply to any country. What's special about India is its sheer size, the size of that market, the size of the population relative to the rest of the world, and particularly the emergence of China and potential emergence of India as a major economy in the 21st century. Here's how I'd phrase it. Here's how I'd think about it. India, in a way, provides a counterweight to China. China is indisputably going to be the major economy of the 21st century, maybe also the major political power, remains to be seen. But China is going to have an excessive amount of power and an excessive amount of leverage over countries like the UK because of its size, because of its future importance in the world economy. Getting a trade deal with China is, or having good trade relations with China is likely to be very, very important. And what India's growth provides is almost like a second option. In India, between them, they account for like almost half, if not half, or I think almost half of the world's population, right? So if you well, you could say if you have both of them not on your side, that's a big problem. But at least if China's not necessarily on your side politically, which is more and more the case for the UK and the West right now, we have more tension with China. India almost provides a sort of a backup buddy, a backup trade buddy, a huge country, huge population that we can sell to, that we can invest in. And so again, we do need them a lot more than they need us. That's sort of a function of their size, basically. And therefore, I would argue, my conclusion would be they're very, very important to the UK economy, basically because of their size and because of the current geopolitical situation, meaning the West kind of needs an alternative to China in terms of this big emerging market economy.